the fans are feeling super cocky about the Gamecocks. That's why we're going to talk about them today because they're a team that was just on the precipice of a college football playoff last year. I mean, literally, you could point to like two different plays that happened last season during the regular season for South Carolina, and had they gone differently, South Carolina is one of those 12 teams in the college football playoff. So, with that being said, and really, honestly, the schedules being very similar to what they were last year in the SEC, right? You're just swapping home and away as far as conference games go. And we all know about the non-conference game every year against Clemson at the end. It's a tough schedule, again, Mason. And so we're going to break down the schedule here in a minute. But we wanted to talk about some things that we're hearing in the spring, right? And just kind of talk about some guys that are on the rise. And at the same time, I also want to mention some of the guys that are returning that are obviously very, very important, to their team. And South Carolina has got some of those guys. Look, let's start off with the big guy on campus, right? Lenora Sellers. Okay, this is obviously your biggest returner on the team, most important position on the field, quarterback. As well as Lenora Sellers did last year, it's crazy to say there's so much room for improvement for him, dude. There is so
Totally.
much room for improvement. And he was such a playmaker last year and put the team on his back when he had to do it. And just very impressive. I'll be the first one to admit, Mason, when we started the season off last year, you remember, I was like, this guy's not an SEC quarterback. I said it. You can go back and watch it. I don't lie. I ain't going to lie. I'm wrong all the time, and I come right back here on the channel. But Lenoris is an SEC quarterback, and he's going to be a doggone good one. What do you think about Lenoris coming back? And, you can kind of take us into some of the players that you're hearing some buzz about here in the spring. But, of course, Lenoris is one of those.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a guy who could realistically be on a short list of a Heisman watch, and I don't think that we're hyping that up too much.
Yeah.
I have some concern about him just kind of staying where he's at, but I think if that were the case, I think if this were a player, a quarterback who's not going to progress, we would have seen that last year. We would. This guy was the best quarterback in college football in November, and you can't tell me otherwise. I think he was.
Yeah.
I really think he was the best quarterback in November. It's a shame that the Gamecocks couldn't make it to the playoffs because I think that they could have done some damage. We were on the cock train for the last month of the season there, and things just didn't quite pan out. But as far as a program goes, they've really got a program headed in the right direction under Shane Beamer, and now with a quarterback who was not that highly touted coming out of high school. I think he was a guy who created some buzz in his senior year and kind of got some momentum going, started seeing some offers come in, and has really made a name for himself in the SEC. Um,
Yeah.
a quarterback like this, though, is nothing without his receivers. We saw it last year where there really wasn't that guy that he could rely on to pass the football to. And you saw Sellers with his legs do some tremendous things. This year, I want to see Jared Brown be more involved. He was good last year. I want to see him be a little bit more involved. I want to see Matteo Bennett be more involved. But obviously, the player that most fans are excited for is Nick Harbor. And this is a guy who is an absolute freak athlete, not telling you guys anything new. He could realistically be one of from a talent perspective, he could be one of the best receivers to ever play football. Like the guy is really that physically gifted. And what I've found out this offseason is that he's no longer running track. This is the first offseason that he's not had to double duties with track and football. So how does that spill out onto the field with him having a full spring practice, not running track, focusing solely on football? I think
Yeah.
that could be huge for the Gamecocks this year, and not to mention all the freshman wide receivers that they brought in. Lex Cyrus, Malik Clark. You're looking to get a little bit of production out of Donovan Murph. Maybe Jaden Sellers is able to place to make some plays for this team as well. I'm if I had to circle a position group on this entire team that I'm hoping gets better, I think is going to get better, it's going to be the wide receiving room and the pass catchers in general.
Going to be a lot of heavy duty, right, on those top three guys that you were talking about there: Nick Harbor, Jared Brown, um, Bennett. A lot of pressure on those guys, right? And you can't really afford a ton of injuries, especially early in the season, because some of those guys you were naming, like Malik Clark, Brian Rowe, Lex Cyrus, Jaden Sellers, those guys are green. I mean, they're green as a dollar bill. So if you're going to have an injury later in the season, I think would be a whole lot better than early on in the season, where you got to throw one of those guys into a situation where he literally is trial by fire,
Yeah. Can you get one or two of those freshmen? I mean, can you hit on one or two of them? Like, I think you've got five there. I don't think it's unrealistic to ask that two of them, kind of pop off this year and end up with 4 or more touchdowns, 500 or more yards. I think that's pretty reasonable to expect.
Yeah. Well, so, we were kind of talking about some guys that are popping in spring, and you can't really listen to anything about South Carolina football without hearing about Rashul Faison, the transfer running back coming in, and it kind of leads me to my next point. I feel like that was a very, very important pickup, and I think it's very important that South Carolina hits on that pickup with the exit of Rocket Sanders, who I think was a pleasant surprise for most people last year. I thought he played. The expectations had gotten lowered in 23 with him a little bit. People thought he was a little slow. His first step was a little slow. Rocket Sanders played well, and now you've got to figure out how to establish a run game without running the quarterback so much. I think you've got to have some continuity in the backfield there with Lenoris Sellers and not have to rely on him to tote the rock a whole heck of a lot. Rashul Faison, I'm looking at some of his stats now from Utah State, 198 carries last year, 1,109 yards. That's good for 5.6 yards a carry. So doing it at Utah State and doing it against the schedule that we're going to kind of talk about here in a minute, they're two totally different things, but I like where South Carolina's head's at as far as bringing in a running back to help out there in that room. And speaking of the run game, the offensive line last year was absolutely piss poor to start the season. I don't know any way to say that. And they grew. I thought they grew. They got better and better, and also Lenoris had a better idea of what he was wanting to do, and his internal timer seemed to shorten as the season went on, and he knew, okay, 1, 2, 3, I got to get out of here, right? And once they started doing that, I felt like the offensive line kind of grew into themselves and got some confidence. And from everything that I'm hearing, the offensive line should be better, if not flat out decent, this season.
Yeah.
They're big. They're averaging 325 pounds a player on the line, and look, I mean, most SEC teams are, right, but those are some big guys, and I think that you feel a little bit better on the ends. You go in the transfer portal and you really tackle the center position with Boaz Stanley. Apparently, there's a lot of confidence with him, and you bring in a backup for him, Rodney Newsome. So I think this will be a better offensive line. Therefore, I think the ground game is going to get better by using the running back. I'm not sure that the total rushing yards will be better or the averages or whatever, but I think you're going to be able to keep Lenoris in the pocket, let him work, let him cook, and don't rely on him to take off whenever your first and second read is breaking down, but still have a run game with the running back. And I think that's super important. Obviously, it's important to be able to have balance against some of the really good defenses that this team is going to go against this year. What do you think? What else on the offense, Mason? I mean, we can kind of talk about some freshmen that we're looking to step up. You've already kind of mentioned some. What else you got? We didn't even mention Air Nolan coming in, and he's going to be your backup. So what better situation could you possibly ask for? Because Air Nolan, we all saw him in the spring game, with Ohio State or one of the scrimmages, whatever it was. He's not ready. And he knows that, and he came to a spot where he can sit in the background and learn. Who better to learn from than one of the guys who I think is going to end up being one of the better quarterbacks in South Carolina history, personally. What a great situation for him. What else do you think about the offense, man?
Yeah, I think one of the themes that I really want to touch on. Not to be a Debbie Downer here or anything like that. It's spring football, right? Where everybody's
Yeah.
got a chance, right? That's
Mhm.
kind of the beauty of college football, and I think that I don't say that tongue in cheek. I really feel like South Carolina's got a chance, but I'm a little bit concerned about the depth along the offensive line, um, at the running back position, at wide receiver. We mentioned having some of those freshmen step up is going to be key here. At quarterback, I feel pretty comfortable with Aaron Nolan. You don't know what you have in him necessarily, but we know that he's another guy similar to Lenora Sellers who has a lot of potential, but maybe halfway through the season, or may just need to get some starts under his belt for him to realize that potential. But yeah, to me, just that's one thing that really stood out looking at this offense was there's just not a ton of depth. Now, we also said the same thing about the defense going into last season, and that wasn't the case. The defense had depth. The defense on the defensive line, especially, had a ton of depth. So you never know. This team's developing really well. So we'll have to wait and see kind of who steps up and who are the guys that we're talking about in November that we're not talking about today, because I'm sure there will be one or two.